Thank you for joining us for this public touchpoint. We're going to give you an overview of the drainage study findings for Rose Lane and Lower Dacian Road. Please follow along as we go over area conditions, study recommendations, next steps, and additional resources for you and your neighborhood. We have worked with HDR to develop this study. The engineering firm is based in Raleigh, and they handled a majority of the work that went into the study, including researching the drainage area and providing recommendations to improve the stormwater system in Southeast Raleigh. First, we'll go over information about the stormwater conditions in this area, as well as the feedback that we received from you and your neighbors. The study area is located just north of the I-440 Beltline and crosses Walnut Creek in Raleigh. There are a number of homes located in the drainage area spanning from Lower Dacian Road to Rose Lane, Jimmy Carter Way, Bellefonte Drive, and King Arthur Road. This is a large drainage area. Walnut Creek is one of the major creeks that flows through Raleigh. So when it rains, a lot of stormwater flows to these neighborhoods from other parts of the city. It's important to know that most of this neighborhood is in the floodplain, which is the area next to a creek or river that floods. On this map that you see here, the area in blue represents the floodplain in your neighborhood. You'll also see the 50-foot-long bridge at the end of Rose Lane that the City of Raleigh built so that you can safely drive over Walnut Creek. However, due to the amount of rain that we've seen over the last few years, water from the creek is rising more quickly and getting closer to the road. Now, during heavy rainstorms, water flows over the road, creating unsafe conditions in the area. In severe flooding, cars can even be washed away, so it's important to never drive through flooded roads. This is why we started working on the study, so that we can make improvements as best as possible in this area. To help you understand what the floodplain is, here's a brief overview of how it works, why it's important, and what you need to know to stay safe.
This is a floodplain. It's the area next to a river or creek that floods during a storm. It's made up of the floodway here and the floodway fringe here. All of these areas flood. This happens naturally. Here's how it works. When we have a lot of rain, creeks throughout the city, like Crabtree and Walnut, can rise quickly. Eventually, that water goes over the stream bank and fans out on the ground, like this. The floodplain gives the rain a place to go when streams can't handle any more water. Floodplains also help reduce pollution. The plants and soil clean and store rainwater, and it's a good habitat for wildlife, too. Most importantly, floodplains lessen the impact of severe weather. Remember, stay alert and stay safe when it floods. That means don't drive through flooded roads. Turn around and go another way. Look for flashing signs when a road is flooded. And if you see a clogged storm drain, be sure to report it. It's also a really good idea to have flood insurance if you live near a floodplain. This will help protect you and your property. To learn more, go to raleighnc.gov/stormwater. To report a clogged storm drain, call us at 919-996-6446.
Now that you've seen what the floodplain is like across the city, here's a more specific example of what creek flooding looks like in your neighborhood. This video will show how floodwaters rise during a large storm on Rose Lane and Lower Dacian Road. We cannot stress enough that flooding in this area is supposed to happen. With that in mind, we realize that homes should not have been built in the floodplain. The land in Raleigh has changed over the years, and a good portion of your neighborhood was built before Raleigh had good development regulations. We have made changes and continue to update floodplain regulations and offer programs to help offset some of the flooding impacts you've experienced. We will talk more about those resources later. During the study phase, we also received input from the community on what you've been experiencing. You let us know that road and home flooding is a major issue. We've documented this as well while monitoring stream gauges in the area during storms. This hazardous flooding is a huge safety concern because you cannot safely exit the neighborhood and first responders cannot easily access the area in an emergency. While we do have stream gauges to track water levels and yellow signs that flash when creek water is reaching the road, there are more improvements that we would like to make. We're also aware of the history of flooding that this area has experienced. This flooding is from Walnut Creek, which causes the street and homes to flood. We cannot prevent this flooding, but we can take steps to offset some of the impacts. So now we'll talk about what those improvements are and what has been recommended in the study. The study includes three main areas. The first is the hydraulic evaluation, which focuses on building a model to represent current flooding conditions of the area. Then, we use this model to simulate what conditions would look like with different improvements, like alternative road routes and bridge upgrades. And finally, the study provides recommendations for projects in the area that help offset impacts from hazardous flooding. During the study, we looked at building new roads to the east and west of Rose Lane so that you had another way to access homes south of Walnut Creek. However, adding a different route would not address safety concerns from flooding in the lower Dacian Road and Rose Lane area. Now, we are looking at two options for upgrading the bridge on Rose Lane. The first is to build a longer and higher bridge that would make it safer to access Rose Lane during a storm. This option would significantly reduce road flooding, but you would still see creek flooding and homes on Lower Dacian Road would flood. This type of bridge project is also expensive and more complicated to complete in a neighborhood setting. The second option is to install a higher, shorter bridge on Rose Lane so that water doesn't flow over the road. Keep in mind that even with a different bridge, there is still a risk of flooding because this area is in the floodplain. For this reason, we would also need to return about 20 properties to green space as a safety precaution and to prevent future damage. This means that if everyone agrees, we would purchase the properties in yellow to ensure that you are out of harm's way. In both options, the bridge and road will be designed to meet current floodplain regulations. Here's a little bit more detail about the program that we offer to return properties to green space. Through the program, we work closely with property owners to purchase properties in the floodplain. If property owners agree, we would purchase properties at fair market value so that there are no longer structures in the floodplain at risk of damage and flooding. This program is completely voluntary. When we do purchase a property, we also help property owners and renters find a new home in the area, and we cover relocation costs. Once the area is returned to green space, we continue to monitor the location when it floods to make sure that the floodplain is functioning properly. Now that you know more about the study recommendation, I'll go into detail about next steps for the study and future projects. The work proposed for the Rose Lane area is very complex and requires substantial funding and a lot of coordination with different partners and organizations to be effective. So, in the near term, we are going to continue to monitor Rose Lane using stream gauges and yellow flood warning signs that you see along the road. Stream gauges tell us how high water in the creek is rising and if there's a need to contact first responders to check on the area. Continue to pay attention to the flood warning signs. They will flash when water is close to or on the road. In about 6 months, there also will be a camera on Rose Lane that'll help us monitor flooding from Walnut Creek. Please remember to use caution when roads are flooded and to avoid driving through them during a storm. In the meantime, we also will be looking into different funding opportunities like grants and bonds to help cover design and construction costs. As I mentioned, this project requires a lot of planning and coordination to build a new bridge and/or return the area to green space. Our top priority will be to keep you as safe as possible while we secure the required funding for the project. Once we do this, we can start the design and construction phases. This can take a few years, but we will keep you updated as we move forward. There are also a few additional resources that may be helpful to you. Our Drainage Assistance Program pays to address flooding in your home, severe erosion to your property, and blocked pipes. To qualify for the program, issues must be caused by stormwater runoff coming from public streets to your property. You also must pay the stormwater utility fee and be willing to dedicate a permanent easement for the project. This program does not help fix nuisance yard flooding, issues caused by landscaping, or stormwater issues caused by private property next to you. It is also a good idea to be very familiar with the floodplain and the best ways to stay safe in this area. We have a lot of good resources on our website that help you see if your property is in the floodplain, learn about the environmental benefits of the floodplain, and changes we're making in regulation to help protect you and the environment. And finally, we would like your input on the study findings and what you would like to see in your neighborhood. Please follow this link to share your thoughts on upgrading the bridge as well as your interest in returning part of the area to green space. Thank you for your time. You can also contact staff if you have more questions or want to learn more about this study. We can be reached at 919-996-3940 or by email at raleigh.stormwater@raleighnc.gov. You can also get updates online by visiting raleighnc.gov/projects and searching South Raleigh Studies.